بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى ما بعد قال الله تعالى إن إبراهيم كان أمة قانتا لله حنيفا ولم يك من المشركين شاكرا لأنعمه اجتباه وهداه إلى صراط مستقيم وآتيناه في الدنيا حسنة وإنه في الآخرة لمن الصالحين ثم أوحينا إليك أن اتبع ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين صدق الله العظيم. My dear respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, inshallah, for the next 4 weeks, we'll be conducting a halaqah on the topic of Ibrahim alayhi salam, this being the month of Hajj, the month of Udhiyah. Hajj is coming, only a month away. Or a little more than a month away. So we decided that we'll speak about Ibrahim alayhi salam and his life, his legacy, and the lessons, most importantly, the lessons that we can learn and derive from his life and his legacy. Understand that Ibrahim alayhi salam is one of the prophets that all of the religions, all of the monotheistic religions believe in. He is the father of all religions, of all monotheistic religions. The Jews believe in him, hold him in high regards. Just like this, the Christians, and also us Muslims. He is a prophet that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in the Quran, throughout the Quran. I believe his incident and his mention is one of those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned the most of in the Quran, him, Ibrahim and Musa alayhi salam. So there's many things, and he was Khalilullah, he was a very close servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was known as Khalilullah, the special friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's many lessons that we can learn, and inshallah in this halaqah we want to go through his life. It's very important that we study the lives of the messengers, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions their lives in the Quran for a reason, right? So we should try to take out time and study and learn about their lives, and see what lessons we can derive from it. One thing that I'm going to try to stick to in this halaqah is stick to the Quran, the mention of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, and not divulge and not digress into other sources. Because a lot of the sources, when it comes to his life, a lot of the sources that we have are from narrations that are Israeli narrations of Ahl Kitab. So it's difficult to prove their authenticity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has mentioned his story throughout the Quran in bits and pieces, in portions. And I said that we would rather just stick to that and derive the lessons from it. So number one, I wanted to begin off by what made Ibrahim alayhi salam so special, right? So in Surah Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan qanitan lillahi hanifa. ولم يكن من المشركين شاكرا لأنعمه اجتباه وهداه إلى صراط مستقيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Ibrahim alayhi salam is also one of those people whom Al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is ordered to follow. ثم أوحينا إليك أن اتبع ملة إبراهيم. In a few places in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs and commands Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam that follow the religion of Ibrahim, yani follow the path, follow Ibrahim, the sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? So what made him special? In this passage in Surah Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 4 qualities of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And like this in Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 2 qualities. And then in Surah Maryam, he mentions 1 quality. And I'm sure there's more qualities, but that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentions of Ibrahim alayhi salam, but I found these 7 qualities. So in Surah Nahl, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? He says, Inna Ibrahim, verily Ibrahim kana ummah. He was a nation in and of himself. And he himself was equivalent to a nation, right? So what does this mean? He obviously was a nation, he was a single man. So the scholars, they explain what this refers to is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to draw our attention to his accomplishments, the things that he achieved, and the things that he accomplished in his life, right? There's so much, the work that he did was so much, it was equivalent to a nation, right? And we look at the followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam in his time, there were very few. Only a handful of people actually followed his message. So he was a person that was always alone, right? He was always alone in everything that he did. Even when he built the Kaaba and he was instructed to give adhan, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِنٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no one there, right, in the land of Mecca, no one there. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, give adhan, call the people and people will come. Right? So throughout his life, he was not the entirety of his life, but a lot of his life he was alone, right? Or he was with his wife, his nephew, Lut alayhi salam, or his children, Ishaq, Ismail alayhi salam, right? So he was alone, but the things that he accomplished, it was equivalent to a nation. The things that he did, it was as if he was a nation by himself. The second quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says is qanitan. He was a person that was extremely devoted to Allah. What does qanitan mean? Qunut means luzum ta'a ma'al khudu', right? That you you make the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala necessary upon you. You make it lazim upon you. You don't digress at all. The most important thing for me, it is the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with a quality of khudu', of humbleness, right? Humility, right? Lowering yourself. This is what qunut means. So he was a person that was completely devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the similar meaning in another word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains, Ibrahim alayhi salam, is hanif. He was hanif. Hanif means a person who only worships Allah and does not worship anyone else. The third quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here is shakiran li an'umi. He was a person that was very grateful for the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him, right? And then the fourth quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, qanitan was one, hanifan was the third, shakiran was the fourth here. In Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Ibrahim la'awwahun halim. That Ibrahim alayhi salam was awwah. Awwah is very interesting if you look at the actual meaning of this word. This literally means a person who does right? This is literally what how they explain. When a person does this is what you say awwah. And they say that you'll make this, so it's like a person usually does that out of either sadness, out of sorrow, right? A person will make a sound like that right? So the way they explain it here is that his heart was so connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that out of that intense love that he had for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was always feeling, always connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, always connected, right? And always out of that love, they say sometimes out of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cry, right? You're crying because of the love that you have for Allah, mixed with fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Which is why Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions in a hadith, right? That person who makes the dhikr and remembrance of Allah khaliyan, right? He remembers him alone, but his eyes are dripping with the tears out of love, out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what awwahun. It's a person who's always returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Halim, he was a person that was very forbearant, right? These are qualities, these are necessary qualities for all of us to have, right? Halim, to be forbearant. Forbearant of what though? Forbearance does not mean that you become okay with the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not what it means, right? It does not mean that you become okay with the disobedience of Allah. When it comes to the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is where you draw the line. But everything else, you just accept and you let it go, right? And if you look at his life, the troubles and the difficulties that he faced from his own father, right? From the kings, from being thrown into the fire, from his nation, right? Wherever he went, he faced such difficulties. But he did not let those difficulties and those challenges bring him down, right? Because this is what happens, is that when a person is faced with big difficulties in his life, big challenges, obstacles, barriers, then what happens is that then he because of the weight on his shoulders or her shoulders, he just will let everything go. He'll fall into depression, and he'll just, you know what, I can't take this anymore, right? And you remember that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being instructed that you have to follow Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now imagine how necessary it was for Ibrahim, for Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have this quality of halim, of being forbearant, yani forbearant upon the difficulties that he faced, right, in his life. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he is Siddiq in Surah Maryam, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا, that he was a person that was very, very truthful. So these are all just a few qualities that I wanted to share with everyone. Various places, and I'm sure there's others that I'm missing as well. But these are qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentions of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Right? And again, there's reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning these qualities, because these are qualities that we need to inculcate within us. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam needed to inculcate within him as well, for him to be successful in his mission. Right? And further on, we also need to bring these qualities, make an effort to bring these qualities within our lives. Right? So who was Ibrahim alayhi salam? Ibrahim alayhi salam, when it comes to his lineage, Ibn Kathir mentions his lineage in his tafsir, in his not in his tafsir, but in his book Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. Right? There's a portion of where he focuses on Qisasun Nabiyyin, the stories of the prophets of Ibn Kathir. Now remember, Ibn Kathir, he in the actual muqaddamah of the book, in the forward of the book, he mentions himself that he took from various sources. He took from the Quran, he took from hadith, and then he took from Israeli riwayat. Israeli riwayat are narrations and things that he learned from the Ahl Kitab, the things that he found in the Torah, right, or in the Injil, in the Old Testament, right? Whatever he found and he assumed was correct, he took. But when it comes to Israeli riwayat, do we need to accept them? Do we not accept them? So he himself says, the opinion of majority of the scholars is لا نصدق ولا نكذب, that we do not fully agree with it. We cannot fully testify to its truthfulness, nor can we say that it's a lie. Right? Why? Because these are books that were revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are not sure what is authentic and what is not authentic. Right? Because their source original was all correct, right? When it comes to Torah, when it comes to the Injil, the Bible, right? Or the Torah, both were correct at one point, and we all accept that, right? But we, because of distortions, we don't know what is correct and what is not correct, right? So nevertheless, Ibrahim Ibn Kathir mentions his whole lineage. I won't go through the whole lineage, but just the point of importance is that his father. So Ibn Kathir says that his father is Tariq. His name was Tariq. Now Tariq had three sons. The three sons were Haran, Nahor, and Ibrahim. So Tariq, the father of Ibrahim alayhi salam, had three sons. One was Ibrahim, one was Haran, and the third was Nahor. Now the son of Haran was Lut alayhi salam, right? Was Lut. So basically, the relationship of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Lut is that Ibrahim alayhi salam was the paternal uncle of Lut alayhi salam, right? He was his father's brother, right? So this is how Ibrahim alayhi salam is related to Lut alayhi salam. Where was he born? He was born in Babylon, right? He comes from the place of Babylon. Babylon is part of the Levant, ancient city that has been there from in Iraq, present-day Iraq, right? And it is one of the most historic and ancient cities in the world, right? That whole stretch of land, the area of the Levant, which comprises of all the way from Syria, portions of Turkey, present-day Syria, going down to Iraq, I think portions of Iran as well. That strip of land is one of the most ancient places in the world, right? The earliest civilizations lived there. Ibrahim alayhi salam was from there. He was from Babylon. Now, during his time, right, in Babylon, right, in that area, what was happening? What was the condition of the people, right? So the condition of the people was that they were worshiping different deities, right? Number one is that they were worshiping idols, right? We know this for sure. They were worshiping idols. They were worshiping. They would worship celestial bodies as well, right? Celestial bodies as well. And it's interesting that if you go look in these ancient like temples that date back thousands of years, there's always like depictions of the stars, of the moon, of the sun, right? There's always in their temples. You'll see different pictures of different idols as well, different things. These are all things that they would worship, right? They would also worship the sun and the moon. They used to use the stars, astrology. They believed in astrology and all of these different things. So they used to worship, number one, people would worship idols. Other people would worship celestial bodies. Third is that they used to worship their kings and rulers. We know this as well, right? They would worship the kings would make the people worship them, right? And then number four, the fourth type of, I guess you could say, religion of the time is Hanif. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates that Ibrahim was Hanif, right? And what is Hanif? Hanif is basically a person who only worships Allah. Yani he comes to this conclusion that it is impossible that these idols are gods. He comes to this conclusion that it's possible that the moon and the sun and the stars are our gods. They can't be our gods. So they believe in a single God, right? This is what Hanif is. Right now, the details of that, some people understood, other people didn't. But they had, as long as you held that belief, then you were considered on the right path by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So these were the four religions or the four practices at that time. Now, when it comes to the incident, the initial stages of Ibrahim alayhi salam, his conversation with his father. So his father, right? His father was Tariq, as Ibn Kathir mentions. But in the Quran, we know his father to be Azar, right? وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ آزَرَ أَتَتَّخِذُ أَصْنَامًا آلِهَةً. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and remember when Ibrahim said to his father Azar. So it's clear in the Quran that Azar is his father. Now the scholars, there's so much of explanation of, was his father's name Tariq, was it Azar, were these two different people, right? Some say that Tariq was his actual father, Azar was, but his father passed away and Azar was a person that was taking care of him, right? But there's no need to go into all of these interpretations. Tariq, this name comes from the Torah, from sources that we can confirm. The Quran is clear cut. So we're going to say his father's name was Azar. Who is Tariq? Maybe Tariq was another name for Azar, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly and emphatically mentions that his father was Azar. So we're going to say his father was Azar. Right? So from a young age, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Ibrahim alayhi salam the ability to see the truth, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Anbiya. He says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And earlier we had given Ibrahim his guidance. Yani from a very young age, right? From the beginning, Ibrahim alayhi salam was given guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we gave him that ability to see the truth, right? And if you look at how he saw the truth, right? You look at, just in today's halaqah, this conversation of Ibrahim alayhi salam with his father and his nation, it's mentioned in three different places. Number one is Surah Anbiya, number two is in Surah Maryam, and number three is in Surah Shu'ara. Three places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in a good amount of detail the conversation and the incident between Ibrahim alayhi salam, his father specifically, along with his nation, right? So now, what was the age of Ibrahim alayhi salam at this time? We don't know what his age was, right? Was he a prophet at this time? We're not sure. But meaning at this time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing this verse of وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. Was he a prophet at this time or not? This meant the source or the incident in Surah Anbiya, it is unclear whether he was a prophet. Now, were all three of these incidents one incident, or were there three different incidents? It's unclear. We're not sure. They could have all been the same incident. If we say that they're all the same incident, and just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining it in three different ways, or maybe he explains a portion of the incident here, and then another, like with further, the same incident with more details in Surah Maryam, and then the same incident with even further details in Surah Shu'ara, they could be. But if we accept that, then we have to accept that he was a prophet at this time, because of what's mentioned in Surah Maryam and what's mentioned in Surah Shu'ara, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly mentions that he was a prophet, and he himself says that I have been given knowledge that you do not have, right? Now, could it be that these were three different incidents? Yes, it could also be that these were three different incidents. And if we take that, then this incident right here, it does not seem like he was a prophet at that time. But also, this is pure an assumption, right? Just looking at the information that we have, there is no guarantee and there is no certainty in it, right? But what nevertheless, Allah, so the point of this verse is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that from the beginning, right? We gave Ibrahim alayhi salam the guidance, yani the ability to see through the truth, right? And if you look at all of these different incidents, right, that Allah passages that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, where Ibrahim alayhi salam speaks to his people, it's very unique, right? Because one is that he tries to convince them in different ways, right, using different mediums, different methods, right, of explaining and passing on this message, right? Sometimes he just looks at the idols himself and he through his own logic. So one thing that we know for sure is Ibrahim alayhi salam was a person who used to observe his surroundings, and he used to observe the actions of the people, right? And he used to contemplate and reflect over it. So number one is that he would observe. Number two is that that observation would turn into reflection and pondering. And then number three is that he would then use his own aql and use his own logic. He used to use his own intellect and his own logic. And then he used to come to a conclusion, right? And this is important. Why? Because living in our society, right? Living in our society, we see ideas being pushed, right? Different mentalities and different ideologies that are being pushed, right? And these are, it's not something that's unique to us. The ideologies were pushed during the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The mushrikun would come and present to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam the different ideas that they had, that why don't you worship our religion, compromises, right? We'll worship your religion 1 year, you worship our religion 1 year, you worship our gods, we'll worship your gods. So these ideas have always been pushed in different ways and forms throughout the history of the world. But in this current day and age, in our current day and age, we see these ideas being pushed much more aggressively, right? Whether it's of homosexuality, Pride Month is coming, homosexuality, whether it's transgenderism, right? LGBT, this whole issue of LGBTQ, all of these things. And if you look at it, what's happening is that people have become unable to come to logical conclusions, right? If you really if you really speak to people that are passionate about these issues, right? Meaning for these issues, a lot of the arguments is just completely illogical. Like we're moving away from the era of logic, right? Sheikh Yasir Qadi, he mentions in one of his talks, he was quoting a professor, and he said that if you look at the history of America, we had different stages, eras in the history of America. He says we began with the era of religion, right, of belief. And you look at our founding fathers, this country was established on religion, right, the belief in God, right, and that was predominant for a very long time in the history of America. And then he said we moved into an era of intellect, the era of intellect. And he said in this era, what happened is that atheism now began to crop up, and then everyone started to use their own intellect and their aql to come to their own conclusions, right? Disproving God and saying there is no such thing as God and all of this, right? So now you have this age of reason, right? If you want to say it's reason, but let's just say the age of reason or intellect. And then he said, now we're pushing into this third era. And he said, what is this third era? He said, this is the era of emotions, right? Any emotions are now the most important thing in our life. We forget about religion, forget about wahi and revelation of God. We don't care. We don't use that as a means of keeping us on the straight path. Nor do we use our aql anymore. We don't use our reason anymore. It's just emotions, right? I feel this way. You cannot make me feel this way. Everything's about feelings, right? And then he actually explains a verse, وَلَوِ اتَّبَعَ الْحَقُّ وَأَهْوَاءَهُمْ لَفَسَدَتِ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that if the haqq, yani if the truth were to follow their desires, ahwa, usually you interpret that and you translate that as desires. But just a desire is an emotion. Emotion is, they're both the same thing. So yani the way you could understand this in our current era, right, in our society, that would make this verse very, very relatable to us, is that if the truth were to follow your emotions, then everything in the world and in the skies would become corrupted. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. That do you make your emotions your God? Whatever you want, that has to be the truth, right? So the point that I was saying all of this is that we're learning this from Ibrahim alayhi salam. The way he spoke, right, with his father, the logic that he's using with his father, the logic that he's using with his people, right? The logic of the idols, disproving this idea of the idols, worshipping idols, even when it comes to celestial bodies, right? How he, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in detail mentions these, right? Which is because I was thinking to myself, is that 3 places Allah mentions the same story and they're very similar, right? In the message, very similar. I mean, there are differences, but the overall message is pretty much the same. And in reality, you could have just mentioned it once and that's it, moved on, right? And focus on another incident. But he mentioned it 3 different places, right? There must be a reason, which is why in this halaqah I wanted to touch up on all 3 different places that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. So the first one is وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. So he said to his father, and we know from Surah An'am, his father was Azar, right? He said to his father Azar, what are these statues? What are these statues that all of you are completely devoted yourself to? Any aqifun, you are devoted yourself to these statues, and they would worship these statues, they would sacrifice in the name of these statues, they would give offerings, like these statues were everything for them. قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين. And this is a reply in every one of the 3 incidents. This is the exact same reply that they give, right? So if these were 3 different incidents, right, 3 different incidents or occurrences, then at the end of every one, they're giving the exact same reply, telling us they're not using their logic, they're not using their aql, they're not listening, right? They're just continuously saying the exact same thing over and over and over again, not willing to listen to the different ways that Ibrahim alayhi salam is trying to explain to them, trying to give the message. They're just like, that's it. This our forefathers did it, our grandfathers did it, our fathers did it. That's it. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're not going to think, right? In our society, everyone is saying this. This has to be true, right? I'm not gonna think for myself. I'm just gonna follow along because everyone else is doing it. So وَجَدْنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. He said that we found our forefathers worshiping them, so we're doing the exact same thing. قَالَ لَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. He says, if that's the case, then you and your forefathers are all in open error, right? You're in open misguidance. Like he says, it's not even hidden. It's open, it's clear, right? What is the benefit in worshiping these idols? So then their reply to him is قَالُوا أَجِئْتَنَا بِالْحَقِّ أَمْ أَنْتَ مِنَ اللاعبين. That are you coming, like they're saying in putting him down, right? And they said that did you come with the truth, or are you just playing with us, right? Like, where are you coming with this change? Why are you trying to change things, right? This is something that we're all practicing, we all agree with. Now you, right? And usually this happens, right? So one person that is on the truth around people that are on falsehood, all of them are going to be on one thing, and this person might be standing up for what he believes in. What happens to that one person, right? What, do you think you're smarter than all of us, right? Do you think you're more intelligent than all of us, right? So this is exactly what they told Ibrahim alayhi salam, that you're just playing. What are you really doing? Are you the only one that has come with the truth? قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض الذي فطرهن وأنا على ذلكم من الشاهدين. Right? He said, no. He said, I'm not playing with you. He said, your Lord is the Lord of the heavens and the earth. who has created them, and I am one of those who bear witness to it. He said that he's explaining to them that your Lord is not this idol. Your Lord is someone who has created the heaven and the earth, everything we see around us. He's created everything, right? Not these things that you worship, not these idols that you create. Tariq, again, Tariq was a person who would create, according to the Israeli riwayat, he would make the idols himself, right? And if you look at the meaning of Tariq in the Hebrew language, that is one of the meanings of a person who makes things with his hands, right? And the reason why he was given that name is because he was a person who would actually make the idols himself, carve the idols or whatever it was. قال, and then the reply was, okay, so we'll stop here. وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامَكُمْ بَعْدَ أَن تُوَلُّوا مُدْبِرِينَ. So this is the first incident, or the first place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the reason why I'm stopping here is because from here onwards, it is more in regards to when Ibrahim alayhi salam decided to break the idols. Now again, when did he actually break the idols? We don't know for sure, right? We're not sure if this again was a completely separate incident. So one thing we do know is that he had these conversations with his father and his people. And we know these different conversations, this portion right here of Anbiya, of Surah Maryam and then Surah Shu'ara. So before we jump into the whole incident of him breaking the idols, we'll go first touch up on how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions his message and his da'wah to his father and his nation, beginning with Surah Maryam. So in Surah Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ Ibrahim. That, and remember in the book remember that there's a mention of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the book. إِنَّهُ كَانَ صَدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. He was a very truthful person and he was a prophet. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ. When he said to his father, Ya abati. Ya abati. Abati is a way of expressing love and respect, right? That when you want to, one is to say, right, that one is to call your father by his name, right? One is to say, my beloved father, my respected father, right? So in English, we don't really have this. But in Arabic, you have, because English is not a language of respect. Arabic is a language of respect, right? Which is why you have these ways of, even if you look at even the other languages, like Urdu has a lot of respect in it. There's no way to speak with respect in English unless you make English sound weird, right? Like if you try to speak very respectfully in English, it just doesn't sound right. Nevertheless, so he said, Ya abati, O my beloved father, lima ta'budu ma la yasma' wa la yubsir wa la yughni anka shay'a. He said that why are you worshipping that which cannot hear? These idols cannot hear, they cannot see, and they will not benefit you at all. Why are you worshipping them? Ya abati, O my beloved father, inni qad ja'ani min al-'ilm ma lam ya'tika fattabi'ni ahdika siratan sawiyya. That verily knowledge has come to me, right? That which has not come to you, right? And this is an indication that he was a prophet. So knowledge has come to me, that which has not come to you. فَاتَّبِعْنِي, follow me. أَهْدِكَ صِرَاطًا سَوِيًّا, I will guide you to the straight path. So this is an indication that in this incident he was a prophet, right? In this instance. Ya abati, O my beloved father, la ta'bud shaitan. Do not worship shaitan, right? Why? They weren't actually worshiping shaitan. They were worshiping the idols. But who is the one that convinced people to worship the idols? It is shaitan, right? So even though they might not actually be worshiping shaitan, they might not be satanic worshippers, but indirectly they are worshiping because they're following shaitan's way, right? So following shaitan's way is a type of worship. Why? Because what is worship? Worship, in essence, according to Imam Baydawi, what is the meaning of worship? It is to humble yourself in front of something else. Or if you want to take this to the next level, in front of something or someone else, or in front of an idea as well, right? We're putting yourself in front of an idea, that you are going to humble yourself and agree with an ideology. That is also a type of worship, right? Whatever it is. This is the idea that I follow, and this is what governs my life, right? That idea should be Sharia, But then when it's not Sharia, then it turns into other things, and at times the ways of shaitan, following these things of shaitan, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly mentioned what are the ways that shaitan will misguide you. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has clearly mentioned, right? What are the ways that he'll misguide us? Following those things is a type of worship, even though it might not be actual worship, but it is a type of veneration. It is a type of respecting his ways, right? So he's saying, don't worship shaitan. Inna shaitana kana lirrahmani asiya. That verily shaitan was disobedient to the merciful. Amongst all the qualities that Ibrahim alayhi salam could have used when explaining to his father, he's saying specifically he used the quality of Rahman, showing, indicating, giving him hope. And this is a lesson for us, that when you're trying to bring someone to the truth, then this should be done, number one, with respect, right? It should not be done in the form of putting the next person down, right? Because putting someone else down, whether they're on batil, right? Even if they're on batil, they're on the falsehood, putting them down is not going to win their heart over. You might win, like our teachers would say, you might have won the argument by putting them down, but you did not win their heart. And the point of us, for us believers, is not to win the argument. Because if your point is just to win the argument, then in reality, this is just show, right? This is just to prove myself, that I want to prove that I am more intelligent than you. I can have the last word, right? So winning the argument is not the point. Winning their heart over is the point. How is that done? It is done with respect. Number one, we see Ibrahim alayhi salam showing respect to his father, right? Second is that giving them hope, right? Because again, he could have said that a shaitan was disobedient to any quality of Allah, the quality of Jabbar, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Jabbar, right? That he's very strong, whatever. But he specifically chose the quality of Rahman to give Ibrahim, to give his father some hope. That, you know what? Yes, you might be on the wrong path right now, but don't ever forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very forgiving. He is very merciful, right? كان للرحمن إن الشيطان كان للرحمن عصيا يا أبت إني أخاف أن يمسك عذاب من الرحمن فتكون للشيطان وليا. And then he's saying, oh my beloved father. And again, before every sentence, he's continuously reminding him that my beloved father, my beloved father, my beloved father, right? Oh my beloved father, I fear that a punishment from this Rahman, right? Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very Rahman, but don't think that we can take advantage of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's saying that I fear that a punishment from this Rahman will afflict you. And then you will become the friend of shaitan. And you will turn into the friend of shaitan. Right? In reality, and again, worshipping these idols is making you a friend of shaitan. قَالَ أَرَاغِبٌ. And then now this is Ibrahim's father's reply. أراغب أنت عن آلهتي يا إبراهيم لئن لم تنتهي لأرجمنك وهجرني مليا. He said that, Ibrahim's father said that, are you turning us away? Are you averting us from my God? Are you averting me from my God? Right? Are you trying to like kind of put my God away? Right? And look, Ibrahim, look at the respect that Ibrahim alayhi salam had for his father. But look at the reply that his father is giving. Right? That are you turning me away, O Ibrahim? Didn't say my beloved son, nothing. He just said Ibrahim, right? La illam tantahi. And usually when your father or your mother use in like a conversation like this, they call you by your name, then you know that things aren't gonna go well, right? La illam tantahi la arjumannaka. He said, if you don't stop this right now, then I'm going to stone you. La arjumannaka. I will stone you. Wahjurni maliya, and just will leave forever. Will separate from me forever, right? For a very long period of time, right? So you look at the response that his father is giving to Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? This is a lesson for us who are fathers, right? For those of us that are fathers, right? At times in our life, we will make mistakes, and just because, and it's not just for fathers, but anyone in authority, anyone who has people underneath him that are under his rule, right? Quote unquote rule, in the sense that under his what is the word? Guardianship, right? Or under his care. So that could be an employer, that could be a father, right? That could be a husband, right? That could be a leader, right? That could be an imam, whatever it is, right? Everyone is open has the ability to make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. And as a father and as a teacher also, we make mistakes sometimes. And it's difficult at times as a parent who has that authority over the child to accept the faults, accept my faults, especially when your child is telling you that you're doing something wrong, right? But the lesson here is that, look, if we have to, when our children tell us something and they're telling us with respect, then we should listen. And if it makes sense, accept it. There's nothing wrong in accepting that we have a fault, right? Accepting, showing your children that I am able to make a mistake will teach them a great lesson where they won't be one of those people later on in their life where they'll just be like, I can never accept that I've ever made a mistake. Some people are like that, right? That you'll just tell them that, you know what, this is wrong, this is not how you should do it. Never will they accept a mistake. No, this is just how it is, right? They're not willing to accept their mistakes. We should not be like that, right? As parents, we should not be like that. Look at the reply that Ibrahim alayhi salam gives his father. Qal salamun alayk, that peace be upon you. Like, he's showing him that, look, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm not trying to disrespect you, right? He's showing him the utmost amount of respect. Right? If we as children ever have an argument with our parents, which we might disagree with them on certain matters. We have to understand that the approach that we take with our parents is very important. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Luqman, what does he say? ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير وإن جاهداك على أن تشرك بي ما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if your parents force you to commit shirk, ascribing partners to Allah is the most hated thing by Allah. There's nothing that Allah hates more on this earth than ascribing partners to Him. Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if they're forcing you to ascribe partners to me, then He says, فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا, don't obey them, number one, right? And وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا, but always understand that you have to live with them in a good manner. You have to live with them in a respectful manner in this world. You always have to respect them, right? Always be kind, always be good to them, right? So we see that this is the sunnah of the prophets. Look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? His father is basically telling him that I'm going to kill you, I'm going to stone you, right? Or just get out of here, right? And then he's saying, Salamun alayk, sa'astaghfiru laka rabbi, innahu kana bi hafiya. He says, I will seek forgiveness for you, O my father. Innahu kana bi hafiya, my Lord is very gracious to me. Right? So now why did Ibrahim alayhi salam seek for Allah's forgiveness? When we know in Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly mentions that Ibrahim alayhi salam should not seek forgiveness for his father. Very easy answer is that he did this before he was instructed not to seek forgiveness for his father. And him seeking forgiveness for his father is mentioned in another place as well, I think in Surah Shu'ara. وَأَعْتَزِلُكُمْ وَمَا تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ وَأَدْعُ رَبِّي عَسَىٰ أَلَّا أَكُونَ بِدُعَاءِ رَبِّي شَقِيًّا. He says, you know what, I'm just going to leave. I'm going to separate myself from you, and I'm going to separate myself from those things that you worship. Right? وَأَدْعُ رَبِّي, and I will call to my Lord. عَسَىٰ أَلَّا أَكُونَ بِدُعَاءِ رَبِّي شَقِيًّا. I have hope that my Lord will not make me a loser in my calls. Yani Allah will not answer my call. I have full yaqeen and conviction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer my call. Right? So this is teaching us another lesson as well. What is that lesson? That lesson is that our job is to pass on the message. Forcing people to accept is not our job. Right? And if we are in a position or in an environment wherein our own iman is at stake and there's fear of our iman, then at times we might have to separate ourselves. That could be separating yourselves from friends, special type of friends, separating yourselves from specific ideas, right? Separating yourself from maybe devices, right? Maybe, and this is not just separating yourself from like shirk and disobedience shirk and these types of things, ideas, but even separating yourself from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are trying to do what is right? At times, because of our environment, we're unable to. Because of the things around us, we're unable to. So what is our job? We try as best as we can to live within the environment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in. But if we can't, then the most important thing is our own protection, and we move away. فَلَمَّا اعْتَزَلَهُمْ وَمَا يَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ وَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and when he moved away, right, from them and from what they worship. Yani he actually made hijrah. We know this from Surah uh, Ankabut, right? From Surah Ankabut. And again, this is why it's important that you just have to connect like all the dots. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives like one bit of information here in this surah, another bit of information there. From Surah Ankabut, we know that he actually made hijrah with his family, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to that. And after he made hijrah is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with Ishaq and Yaqub, right? So this is what's mentioned in Surah Maryam. Now in Surah Shu'ara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ Ibrahim. So my intention was only to go for 30 minutes, but now I guess we'll just finish this. Let's go till Isha now. Or we'll go till Adhan. Adhan is that? 9:50. Okay, we'll carry on till Adhan. But it seems like, I guess all the halaqas will be like this, because this is a very it's a very detailed story that Allah, or there's a lot of details for us to take lesson from in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to practice upon all of this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Shu'ara, He says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ Ibrahim. And mention to them, recite to them the incident in the story of Ibrahim. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. When he said to his father and his nation, what are you worshipping? They said, we are worshipping these idols, right? And we are completely devoted to them. We have devoted ourselves to them. And then he says, his reply to them is that, do they hear you? Like, why are you worshiping them? Again, using his logic. Do they hear you when you call them? إِسْتَدْعُونَ هَلْ يَسْمَعُونَكُمْ إِسْتَدْعُونَ أَوْ يَنْفَعُونَكُمْ أَوْ يَضُرُّونَ. Or do they cause you any type of harm? Do they cause you any type of benefit? Like, do they give you any benefit? Do they cause you any harm? Like, again, what is the reason? What is the logic in worshiping these idols that you yourself are creating? Right? And when you speak to his father was the one that used to build the idols. He used to carve the idols himself we know that from the other sources. And then again, what is the reply? بَلْ وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا كَذَلِكَ يَفْعَلُونَ. That, we found our forefathers doing this, so we're just doing the exact same thing. Right? Inability to use their own mind. Right? This is a dua of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. Right? Where Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, oh Allah, always show me the truth to be truth and falsehood to be falsehood. Right? Right? So this is something that we need to always ensure that we are using our intellect, we are using our logic. Right? We don't use our logic to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Ibrahim alayhi salam didn't use his logic when it came to the command of Allah. We know that also. So even as much of a logical person as he was, he understood where he should be using that logic and where he should be using that intellect. Right? When it came to the command of Allah, that was the most important thing to him. Right? How do we know this? The command of building the Kaaba and giving adhan. Illogical. Who are you going to call? There's no one that lives here. It's a barren land. Completely illogical. I'm not trying to say that the hukm is illogical, but outwardly, it doesn't make any sense. It's illogical to us. Obviously, it is not illogical because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the command. Any command of Allah can never be illogical. What happens is that it's illogical to us because we don't understand it, because our ilm and our understanding is so much more deficient, and it is absolutely nothing in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that command, it doesn't make sense to us, but he still did it. At that time, he didn't use his logic then. Slaughtering his son does not make sense. Why should I slaughter my son? But he didn't use his logic there, right? Being thrown in the fire, what am I going to do? This is outwardly is going to harm me. But he went with it because he had trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he was a person that was very intelligent and logical, but he understood when to use it and when not to use it. Right? And he never used it in front of the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We only use our logic, sadly, when it comes to the command of Allah. Right? Sadly, but this is a reality. That is like the only time we want to use our logic. Right? We use our logic to change the Quran. We use our logic, right? And it's so disturbing, and it's so foolish right? Some of the things that we hear people say, right? And the only reason people say these things about Islam is because of the society that we live in. That's it. There's no other reason, right? We get all these people that are saying that no, Islam does not say homosexuality is haram, right? There's nothing like that. Allah doesn't say that in the Quran with those words. Yeah, He doesn't use it with those words, but it's clear cut in the Quran. For you to say that it is not haram will make a person a kafir. It will make a person a disbeliever. For to say that homosexuality is not haram, right? And this it's we have to be very, very clear in this. There's no, we can't wishy-wash around this, right? For anyone to say that homosexuality is okay in Islam will make that person a disbeliever because they are going against clear-cut verses of the Quran, right? Here we want to use our logic, right? In these verses, and I've actually read in this past few weeks and probably month, I've been reading up a lot on like arguments that people make in regards to these whole ideas and pushing in Islam, what arguments they make. It's such foolish arguments, right? It goes to show how superficial certain people's knowledge is of Islam and the Quran and the Sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? I'm digressing, but khair. A person, so since I touched on this topic, let me finish it. If a person believes that to be gay is or homosexual is okay in Islam, will make a person a kafir. But having feelings, having just pure emotions does not make anyone a sinner, right? Because some people say, but I have these emotions, does that mean I'm not a Muslim? No, we're not saying you're not a Muslim, right? You are still a Muslim just because, even if you have the feelings, homosexual feelings. But understand those are just feelings. As long as you don't act upon it, right, you're still in the clear, right? If you're able to suppress those feelings and control those feelings, you're fine. Now, if you act upon it, that still won't take you out of the fold of Islam. It'll make you a sinner, like how if a person commits zina, they're a sinner, right? Similar like that, if you act upon those feelings, homosexual feelings, right, then you will be a sinner, but that doesn't take you out of the fold of Islam. The only thing that will take you out of the fold of Islam is when you begin to change the Quran and start saying that, you know what, no, it's halal and this and that. No, that is when a person's iman is in jeopardy, and we have to be very, very careful. We should not try to change Islam to make other people happy and to include other people within Islam, right? That is not our job. Our job is not to make people happy. Our job is to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing else, right? If in earning the pleasure of Allah, we make people unhappy, then so be it, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most important thing in our life. That's it, right? And it's a whole nother topic on its own. I don't want to delve into it. So, where am I? قَالَ فَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْبُدُونَ. And then Ibrahim alayhi salam says that, do you really, are you really thinking about what you're worshipping, right? And what you're doing? Like, think about it. Right? He's trying to tell them, think about it. أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمُ الْأَقْدَمُونَ. You and all of your ancient forefathers. Think about what you're doing. Like, have you really given it any thought of what they're doing? Right? فَإِنَّهُمْ عَدُوٌّ لِي إِلَّا رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Verily, they are an enemy to me. Right? Yani, this act, the idols are an enemy to me. And this act of worshipping, those that worship idols are an enemy to me. So he's speaking to his father. Because remember, إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ. Speaking to his father, speaking to his nation, his own people. Right? At that time, for us, like the circle that we grew up with it might not have any importance to us. Right? Meaning we can probably just leave that circle, create another circle, and that's it. Life will move on. At that time, like your lineage and your family, your tribe was the most important thing. There was nothing more important. To be forsaken by your tribe was like one of the biggest sources of dishonor, right? That my own tribe has dishonored me, right? But he is straight up, because he's saying that, you know, this is the end. We can't do this anymore, right? I've tried to be nice to you, ya abati, by showing that compassion, right? I've tried to be logical with you as well, right? But nothing's working. So now he's making his stance very clear. فَإِنَّهُمْ عَدُوٌّ لِي, that you are an enemy to me. إِلَّا رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ, except the creator and the nourisher and the sustainer, the Rabb of all of the worlds. الَّذِي, and then he describes who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? This is the first place that he describes who is Allah, who is his Lord, right? الَّذِي خَلَقَنِي فَهُوَ يَهْدِينَ. He is the one who has created me. He is the one who gave me guidance. He is the one who guided me. وَالَّذِي هُوَ يُطْعِمُنِي وَيَسْقِينِ. He's the one who feeds me. He gives me to drink. وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ, and when I become sick, فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ, then he cures me. Right? So this is a little different. This is the only place where he says وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ. Everything else is he is the one who created me. He is the one who gives me food. He's the one who gives me water. He is the one who gives me everything. But here he didn't say Allah when he makes me sick. Right? He says when I become sick, even though our belief is that obviously Allah is the one who makes us sick. Right? We don't become sick by ourselves. Right? Sickness is in the hands and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he didn't associate that sickness with Allah. Why? Because this is something that is bad. Right? Becoming sick is not a desired quality for anyone. Right? It's not something anyone wants. And it is inappropriate for us to connect that which is disliked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though it is true. Right? So that's the reason, out of respect, he said, when I become sick, فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ, then Allah cures me. Right? وَالَّذِي يُمِيتُنِي ثُمَّ يُحْيِينَ. He is the one who will give me death, and he is the one who will resurrect me again. Right? وَالَّذِي أَطْمَعُ أَن يَغْفِرَ لِي خَطِيئَتِي يَوْمَ الدِّينِ. And then he makes dua, and he says, I have hope that my Lord will forgive my sins on the day of judgment, reminding them of the day of judgment. Right? Oh Allah, and then he makes the dua. He says, oh Allah, grant me wisdom, and وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ. Make me from amongst those that are pious. Right? This is something that, like, we sometimes, you look, he's a prophet of Allah, he is Khalilullah, right? His status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unparalleled. He probably knew that as well. Yet still you see the humbleness that he had in front of Allah. Right? In the month of Ramadan, I had shared after the Fajr Halaqa a few du'as of prophetic du'as of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even there you see the humbleness that he had within him, how humble he was. Right? So وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ, that count me amongst the pious, keep me with the pious, always keep me with them. Right? Not that I'm pious on my own, right? No, because I'm not. I don't have any trust in myself. Right? This is the sunnah of all of the prophets. Right? This quality of humbleness, quality of fear, quality of that, you know what, I might have not accomplished anything, right? Even though they were prophets. Now, if they have this attitude, how much more should we also have this attitude? وَجْعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صَدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. And oh Allah, make me among those who's and destined for me a truthful description among the next generations. Right? Yani the people, then the next generation should truly understand who I was. Right? Make their understanding of me according to the truth, according to reality. And this dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam was accepted. Right? Which is why the Jews accept him, the Christians accept him, and the Muslims accept him. Everyone accepts Ibrahim alayhi salam, right, as a great prophet. So this dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam was accepted, and like this, He continues to make dua. He says, "Waj'alni," and make me from amongst those that will inherit Jannah. Right? Forgive me and my father. Waghfir li abi, forgive my father. Innahu kana min ad-dallin. So over here also he's seeking forgiveness for his father. But again, this is before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him not to seek forgiveness for his father. Right? And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him not to seek forgiveness for his father was because his father was a mushrik, and we are not allowed to make dua of maghfirah or mercy for a mushrik, for a polytheist. For them, we can make dua of hidayah, guidance. Oh Allah, guide them. We can't say, oh Allah, forgive them. Oh Allah, show mercy to them. It's clear in the Quran. And then he says, وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ, and do not disgrace me on the day of resurrection. Right? Look, he has this fear. Right? The fear that Ibrahim alayhi salam had is being disgraced on the day of judgment. Right? Is that a fear that I have? Is that something that I ever even think about? That what will happen to me if Allah begins to question me about my actions in this world? Right? will I be disgraced or will I be honored on that day? Right? We're fearful of being disgraced in the company that we work in. We're scared of being disgraced in the classroom that we study in, right? We have fear of being disgraced within the community that we live in, right? Do we not have fear of being disgraced in front of all of mankind on the day of judgment, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather every single soul, should that also, and again, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam also, or it wasn't Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but in the dua is also mentioned in the Quran, رَبَّنَا لَا تُخْزِنَا, no, not that one. The one in Surah, the end of Surah Ali Imran. No. But anyways, over there also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions the dua of one of the pious people of the past, that do not disgrace us on the day of judgment. And then he says, on that day, only wealth will not help you, nor will children help you. So he's describing in his dua, right? This is a dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, but he's teaching in this dua. He's describing on that day all this wealth that everyone has, the wealth that they're earning by disobeying Allah, right? The wealth that they're earning and the status that they have. At that time, status was because of kids. So for us, status is not because of kids anymore, right? We have status because of other things, right? So the status it's not going to help us on that day. He's reminding us, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ, except for that person who comes to Allah with a pure heart, right? And what is a pure heart? A heart that is pure. It is rid of all of the evils and diseases of the heart, whatever evils and whatever diseases those are. And thereafter he continues the dua, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist him on the day of judgment. And he speaks more about the akhirah. So inshallah we'll end off here. We will inshallah in the next halaqah carry on with the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam, as mentioned in the Quran, focusing and sticking to verses from the Quran. We make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all the ability to practice. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah.